All right, do you remember this? That wild weather that impacted Soldier Field during week 1 of the NFL season? There were heavy downpours and gusty winds that created a wild game, and that celebration was fantastic. Players played on a makeshift slip and slide in the end zone. I'm meteorologist Patrick Crawford. I am joined now by Kevin Roth, sports meteorologist for the Action Network and rotogrinders.com. Kevin, we appreciate you joining us here on Weather Undefeated, and we just want to talk about weather in sports. You've been doing this for quite a bit. Can you kind of just tell us about sports and weather and how they are related?
Yeah, I've been doing this for almost a decade now, strictly sports weather. And any sport that's outdoors, if it has a weather component to it, it can impact the outcome of that sport. And so that's important for the players, for the fans, for fantasy sports, for sports betting.
So it was the daily fantasy. That's kind of why you started to get into this?
Yeah, so it started with DraftKings basically for baseball. I had randomly someone reached out to me and said, we need someone who can tell us if a baseball game is going to get rained out. Because if you play a player in this game in daily fantasy and the game gets rained out, you get 0 points, you lose your money, you're going home empty-handed.
That's a good point, yeah. Kind of take us through your routine. You know, you look at the schedule, you kind of see, okay, which games are going to be outside, and then you kind of start to put together that forecast. Can you kind of talk about your process?
Yeah, for something like baseball, it's one day at a time. People are always like, hey, Kevin, I'm going to the game on Saturday. Is it going to rain out? I never even look a day ahead in baseball, right? I've got each single day to worry about and to work on. The big concern for baseball is going to be rain, because games get rained out pretty frequently in baseball. Whereas a sport like football, where there's not a game every single day, I'll look ahead a little bit more. And we're looking more at how wind can impact things or what other weather variables are out there. And that's more so because not that the game's going to get canceled, but because the game could be lower scoring, or it could favor running backs as opposed to quarterbacks.
And Kevin, something that seems like it's growing, it's getting bigger and bigger, fantasy sports as well as sports betting. Can you kind of go into detail on how that weather forecast might play a big factor when it comes to those two things?
Yeah, sure. We'll take football for an example. I started this to give out those forecasts, not so much for season-long fantasy sports players, but for daily fantasy sports players, people who play on sites like DraftKings or FanDuel. Those are the people who really want all of the information. And so my job is not just to look at things qualitatively and say, hey, it's going to rain, but also to look quantitatively and say, okay, in games where we've had a 15 to 20 mile per hour wind, we've seen the passing yards drop 20%. We've seen the total scoring drop 15%. So we pulled these statistics, and it gives us a better idea of what to expect for those players, for daily fantasy sports or fantasy sports in general. And then sports betting is just getting tied into that, right? It's the same data that people want to know. It's just an even bigger group of people that want that information. So I'm grateful to be in a spot where everything is growing, everything is trending up. And with sports betting, it's trending up real fast.
You said you've been doing this almost a decade. I'm wondering if you've got any anecdotes, any tidbits about how there was a big weather event that impacted a sporting game, whether it's football, baseball, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of them now. I can think of some football games where, I was looking at short range modeling and was like, oh, we're going to see sustained winds here. And this was a game in Cleveland of around 30 miles per hour. There's going to be wind gusts up over 40. And I was telling everyone, like, you can't play quarterbacks. You can't play wide receivers. This is not going to go well. And it was so incredibly windy that not only could they not throw the ball, but when they tried to punt it, like the first time they went to punt it, they punted the ball up and it came back at them like a boomerang. It went like 3 or 4 yards and swooped right back and basically landed where they kicked it from. So those high wind games are they're so fun. They're fun for me, and they're just fun for the fans, I think, to watch.
Hey, Kevin, I appreciate you joining us. Kevin Roth, sports meteorologist for the Action Network and rotogrinders.com. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.